Hey everyone, welcome to our BloodHound webinar today. We're going to give just a couple of minutes for folks to join and wrap up meetings and get a drink and all that good stuff, and then we'll get going. Thanks everyone for joining. I feel like I need some hold music or something for everybody to listen to while we're waiting for everyone to get in. Just another minute or so. Ashley's helping us out from our events and marketing team. She just posted in the chat. She mentioned use the Q&A function. That will be really helpful. I am on my own today, so I won't really be able to look at those as I go. So I will take a look at them after I get through all the content. I would not expect this to take the full hour. Always good to have some spare time, but I am happy to answer questions at the end as best I can. So if you got them, chuck them in and we'll see what we can do to help. The recording will be available afterwards at the exact same link. I will also get the slides posted as well. I believe that'll be on the Spectre Ops slide GitHub page. Not sure, Ashley, if that's something that we can link in the description afterwards as well.
Yep, for sure.
Excellent. Cool. All right, it is a couple minutes after. We'll get started. Thanks everyone for joining. My name's Stephen Hinck. I lead product management for BloodHound here at Spectre Ops. Excited to be chatting with you today about what we've been doing in the product and what we've got some coming up. Two quick things for everybody. This is being recorded. It will be recorded at the same link that you joined with or signed up with. It'll be available afterwards. We will also link the slides there, put them onto the Spectre Ops GitHub page for all of the slide content that our organization puts out. So all of that will be available, which will be helpful because I will give you a warning that I've put a bunch of links in here to things that we've done, things that are interesting to people. So it'll be good and helpful to have. I'm well aware that those links will need to be available. Cool. Today we're talking about BloodHound. We're going to do a little bit of a review of what we've been doing over the last quarter. I'm going to go through and both talk about the things we've changed and also demonstrate them for you. So if you've not seen them or had an opportunity to interact with them, you'll get an opportunity for that as well. Talk a little bit about things that we are working towards in the future. And then I am more than happy to answer questions at the end. So with that, I'll go ahead and get started. Starting out with what's new. So what have we been up to for the last quarter or so? A lot. We have been pretty busy. For folks who have been keeping track, we do our releases about every 3 weeks. Most releases include a combination of things. Sometimes they're more focused on bugs than features, but we've got a lot of good stuff out in the last quarter. Starting out with Active Directory certificate services. So we have been super busy here. The coverage here includes not just coverage for the paths themselves, but some features to support looking at those things as well. For those unfamiliar with the certified pre-owned white paper that Spectre Ops put out 2020, there is a considerable number of paths or escalation possibilities that we have identified within Active Directory certificate services. The fun part about this is as you go into research, you'll find something interesting and you'll say, hey, this is a thing, this is unique. I'm going to call this ADCS 6. And then when you go through the process of continuing that research and productizing that research, you have to be very, very specific about what each path includes and what are the ways that you fix it. And so that's where we get this concept of this ADCS ESC6A and B. These are two paths that are very, very similar with slight differences to them. And those differences result in differences in how you as a red team or a pen tester might execute that particular path. It also makes a difference for folks on the defensive side when you're trying to mitigate the risk from those paths. And so we've done a bunch of stuff. We've got 10 or so of these things in here now, which is great, and more to come. But I wanted to walk you through kind of what that looks like. So in my demos today, I have both a BloodHound Enterprise and BloodHound CE environment set up side by side. They are running on the exact same database and backend infrastructure with different UIs in front of them. So I can show you kind of what this looks like in both products. So for our BloodHound Enterprise customers, this might be something that you'd see. When you log in, you'll see that, hey, your organization has a bunch of these very critical attack paths, meaning that something around 100% of your environment has the ability to reach control of your critical assets in your environment. In this case, your domain. So if I take a look at one of these, we'll just pick on ESC1 because why not? We all like ESC1, right? In BloodHound Enterprise, you get a nice description of what the path is. You can see who's involved. So we've got authenticated users has a path over the Phantom Corp domain. And we can see a quick description around what that remediation looks like. Now, for those who have done this, who have spent time digging into certificate services and resolving these paths, you know that it is much more in depth than that. So in Enterprise, we do give this full kind of walkthrough of, hey, how do you remediate this? How do you find this thing? What matters to you? How do you fix it? And so you get all that information, which is super helpful, nice and long and in depth. But what you can do is you can actually look at and explore one of these. So you can see that authenticated users in this environment has multiple paths, which is a good time. Feel bad for the admins here. You've got some work to do, but you can do it. I believe in you. So authenticated users has ESC1 onto Phantom Corp. Now, just to show you that I have nothing up my sleeves, I can do this same path here. Authenticated users to domain Phantom Corp. Woohoo! Check that out. Looks exactly the same. All right. So I have all these paths in both environments. I can take a look at them. I can see authenticated users has paths to Phantom Corp. Now, something that we felt was really, really important in our building out these capabilities was not just showing you that this exists, because that is very helpful. But these paths are incredibly complex. They involve a lot of different pieces of information, from the certificate authorities to the enrollment servers, the certificate servers, the certificate templates. And so one of the things that we created as part of this feature set was what we call composition. What that means is for our complex edges, right now this just applies to our ADCS edges. If you click on them, you'll get the usual entity panel that folks who've used BloodHound are familiar with. You can see where this is coming from and to, when it's been collected. Lots of good information about the path itself, how to execute the path. If you're in a red team engagement and you're looking to take control of this particular domain. So you get all that stuff, and that's available on both sides, right? So we have all that information. But down here, this composition feature is super helpful. So what the composition feature does is it basically reverses the information that we used during the processing of the data that you uploaded to BloodHound. And it reverses that information to give you what made that up. So in this particular case, what makes up this ESC1 path is shown here for you. So you can see the certificates, the certificate templates, the certificate authorities, and all of that are involved in this particular attack. Each of these pieces of information is also relevant to you as a tester in how to actually execute this attack. Because if I go in here and I look at this section, it's going to give me information to say, hey, I need this information in order to execute this attack. And all of that information is available to you here in this particular view. So this is something that we did to make this easier for folks to understand, because again, they are very, very complex structures of attacks. They're not a very simple, hey, I have generic all on a user, I'm just going to change their password and on I go. So this is something we did. I'm really excited about having this in the product. We will eventually go back and add this into other edges. For now, we're doing it for net new, but from the ADCS perspective, this is kind of what it looks like. Go in, find those edges. You have the composition, you have the abuse pieces that you're used to and familiar from with BloodHound. So this is really, really exciting, and we're really glad to have that in the product now. All right, data enhancements. So long awaited, one of the last pieces before we called BloodHound CE generally available was marking objects as owned. This is nice and simple. Excuse me. You can right click on an object and you can say add to owned. Right? And there we go, update successful. I can use Cypher to see my owned objects. So for those who are not familiar with it, you can click on Cypher, click on opened. I saved a custom search here just to make this easier, so I'm not typing this whole thing out for you while we go, and you can see that I've got a couple objects in this particular environment that I have marked as owned. I can right click on these again. I can remove from owned. If I run the search again, hey, now only one object shows up. So for folks who are familiar with this, used to using it, you can mark objects as owned. You can do your pathfinding to it. Just a note for folks who are familiar with BloodHound Legacy, we've changed a little bit about how this works. It's not a Boolean value anymore. We use the system tags field. So this is generally how we recommend doing it for best performance. Using that coalesce verb in Cypher is the best way to identify that. And then the tag itself is called owned. The group management view. So you've marked a bunch of things as owned. You've got a bunch of things marked as high value or as tier 0. If I go into group management, I can see all of that. So in BloodHound and BloodHound Enterprise, ta-da, it looks basically the same. It might be ordered a little bit differently, but it's the same data, same information. Tier 0 high value are all the things that matter most in your environment. We start out with all of the default things that have full control in the environment, or at least most of them. Administrators, domain admins, domain controllers, schema admins, backup operators, etc. We will include all those things. We'll include members of those things. Then we will also include the group policy objects that apply to those as well. Those will start out your high value or your tier 0 group within BloodHound and BloodHound Enterprise. You can also see from in this view here in group management, you can change and you can see that owned group. You can do this, Jimmy. Man, I temped the demo gods. It was working just fine before I got into the demo. Now it doesn't want. Hey, look at that. Now it works. So you can see what's included in that particular view, what's included in that group. As you saw here, I can add or remove objects from these groups here. So if I wanted to add authenticated users, I could also pop that in here, confirm that change. And that will, man, again, demo gods, forgot to do my sacrifice. But group management view will help you be able to more easily see those things that are in that environment. I don't know why it's not agreeing with me. I'll have to go take a look at that. It's a good way to help you understand what you've put in own, what's in tier 0. You can modify those things from there and all that. The next one is going to be the power user role. This is one that was a more commonly asked for on the enterprise side, but both products share the same auth code base, so it's available in both. The concept of the power user role is to fit somewhere between, not somewhere, fit exactly between the user role and the administrator role. So the administrator role has full control. You can add and remove users, you can change their roles, you can reset passwords, you can modify the graph and upload data. The user role can do none of those things. The user role basically can just read data in the product. And the request that we got a lot from folks was, hey, I need something in the middle, right? I want somebody who can modify data in the graph because that's something that they're responsible for, right? They need to create SharpHound clients, or they need to upload data through the file ingest or what have you. But I don't want them to be able to modify access to the environment. I don't want them to be able to change feature flags. And so this is what the power user role is for. It's for those cases where you have somebody that's not quite an admin, but needs more privilege than a any regular user. So in this case, if I go into manage users, if I create a new user, in the role options list, I do have this new option for power user here, as well as some of the other ones that are available. So this is now available for everyone to make use of. Again, basically it means that they have the ability to modify the data in the graph, but no other admin privileges. So they don't have the ability to modify any early access features. They can't modify SAML. They can't modify users in the product, but they would have access to some of this stuff up here. Ingest and management. Y'all were very vocal about this. We're very happy to have been able to make some improvements here. So pretty excited about this. It makes everybody's life a lot easier. One of the things that we wanted to make sure we get in there was native support for zip. That's now in there. It works great. Love it. You can just upload your zip file. You don't have to unarchive the contents from export from SharpHound or Azure Hound in order to upload it. We take care of that all for you, which is fantastic. We also have support for larger file sizes in the user interface. We did at one point put in a restriction on that. The reason for that restriction was because we were aware of the fact that certain file sizes would exceed the browser's ability to actually handle that data. And the feedback we got from folks in the community was largely, hey, just let my system handle that. And so, hey, you know what? Sure, makes sense. So we've removed that case or that restriction, so you can upload files technically as large as you want. Now I say technically because it's more a limitation now on your browser than it is on anything else. Because what has to happen is that data gets uploaded to the browser's memory, it packages it up, it does the hashing to make sure that it's validated as it's transmitted, it sends that data in. So there is opportunity still where this will not work in your environment. If you have a very, very, very large collection, splitting those would still be a valuable thing to do. Alternatively, using the API works great. There's a couple of folks who have created simple scripts to upload to the API directly and skip the UI. That'll work really, really well. Tools like ChopHound and whatnot are also available. But for most people, hopefully now this should work just fine. You can do the collection in your environment, you can drop it into the UI, and all of it will just work. That leads me to the next piece, which is the streaming JSON parser. This is pretty cool. One of the challenges that we had with the project is that historically, and this is for enterprise as well, we basically used a fairly simple parser that loaded all of the JSON blob into memory, ran through all of it, pulled it into the ingest. Advantages and disadvantages to all things. The nice thing about this means that we can now stream through that JSON kind of one block at a time. And so the memory impact on your system is significantly more limited. For folks who are looking into this or have particularly large environments, you might have noticed significant usage of memory when you're doing ingest before. The streaming parser will take or will help significantly with that because we don't have to load all of that data into memory. On BloodHound Legacy, we did this locally behind the scenes in your own environment. So When you uploaded the zip, it put it locally in your file system, unzipped it, processed the whole thing in, and loaded it in. So it was kind of hidden behind the scenes. With the new architecture, with the 3-layer architecture, we had to build this into the API. We did that now. Makes it a lot easier, more performant for you, uses less system resources, and should mean you can run the product with significantly more machinery than you could have in the past. And then one other one, again, very hotly, commonly asked for, was the ability to basically manage the database. We've added this into the product now, so I'm going to hop over here again. In the admin section of the product, you have this database management feature. You can see our nice, lovely warning. This change is irreversible. It will delete data from your environment. If you don't want to lose your data, don't use this. You can check any of the options in here. Hey, I want to remove the graph data. I want to remove my selectors or all my asset groups, etc. If you check all these boxes, more or less, this will take you back to when you first spun up your environment. If I click proceed, it's going to pop up, give you another warning, ask you to type in a nice little phrase. We need to ask BloodHound nicely to please delete our data. All of this just to make sure nobody just accidentally is like messing around with this and kills their stuff. For our BloodHound Enterprise customers, this same functionality exists on BloodHound Enterprise as well. I can go into admin, database management, all the same things apply. So you can kind of reset your things if you feel the need to do so. All right, I want to take a moment to thank a handful of folks from our community. Over the last quarter, we have had a number of community contributions. These are all the folks who have contributed things to the product or to the project that have been accepted. This is across all of the repositories, SharpHound, AzureHound, and BloodHound. Thank you all very, very much. I know there are some other folks that have submitted pull requests that we're looking at or working through you with. We're excited to keep working on that. But seriously, thank you, everybody who has reported issues, has been willing to troubleshoot with us, who has committed code, who has asked for things or asked for how to do things, and even participated in the BloodHound Slack community. There's a lot of really helpful people in there. So if you're not a part of the BloodHound Gang Slack, I would highly, highly recommend it. I realize now that I didn't put a link to it in this deck. Actually, if you happen to have that handy, that would be great to drop in chat for everybody. But the BloodHound Gang Slack is really, really helpful, and there's a lot of really good folks in there who have been helpful in getting things solved, whether that be individual issues because of how they've deployed it, or helping us understand what went wrong so that we can fix bugs. Fantastic, and really, really appreciate everyone's participation and help for each other there. All right. One of the things that we have been asked for a lot is, hey, do you have a sample data set? And until just recently, the answer was no, not really. We had various things floating around, but thanks to Jonas and Aaron within our team, we now have one. So the stuff that I was running through today, this is this exact data set. It's available in GitHub. Again, there's a link there. You can find it in the examples folder. It contains multiple domains. It has some trusts. It does have privileged data. Obviously, we looked at some ADCS. So there's a good set of data here that if you're interested in trying things out and you just want to poke and play, you have that opportunity. You can go and check it out, poke around, run some Cypher, query things, look at data without having to collect in your own environment. So that is now available. We'll probably work on an Azure data set as well, but wanted to get something started. But this is the data set that I've been using today for this particular webinar. So again, thank you, Jonas. Thank you, Aaron, for your help in putting all of that together. All right, I'm gonna grab a quick drink real quick and we'll talk about what's next. All right, what's coming next? So in our next release, that release will be, I didn't look at the date, so apologies. It will not be next week, it will be the following week. Among other things, the biggest things that are going to be in there is the ability or native support for cipher mutation through the product. This will be an environment variable for our CE customers, so you can go in the Docker Compose, and you can modify this to enable the ability to run cipher mutations from the UI, or you can use the API as well. This will be really handy for folks. Right now, I know people are doing this through exposing the Neo4j database and then running it there. You'll be able to do this natively through the product now, which will be great. And then ESC 13 will also be available in there. I linked to the blog post from Jonas on ESC 13. This is one of the newer escalation paths. So this was not, pardon me, this was not in the original certified pre-owned research that was done a couple of years ago. This was additional paths that we identified through furthering our research. Will and Lee did a fantastic job on that research and identified a lot of really good stuff. As that has continued further in order to put it into BloodHound, we have identified new things, new varieties. And so this is one of those things we're really excited to be able to get this into the product and available for all of you. Going forward, research is still going. We've got some really cool stuff in Azure. We're not quite ready to share that with you yet, but I am confident that we'll have a forthcoming webinar about some of that as it gets closer. We also have additional ESC paths that we are working on. So ESC 14, for example, Jonas put a blog post out on that one. And then there's obviously other ones that we haven't yet got into the product, 5, 7, 8, for example, that we need to continue that research on to take it from the fantastic work done originally in order to be able to put it into the product and have it be an option for you. And then I wanted to hit real quick. I'm going to make the assumption, and I feel it's a fairly good assumption, that everybody who's joined this webinar is interested in BloodHound things. And so this is a short list of content that we have put out recently that is all somewhat BloodHound adjacent. Now, this is not all the content that Spectrox has put out. We put out a lot of different stuff from different folks on different things. Highly recommend checking out our blog and following that if you haven't, or on Twitter. We do link all of our new blogs, webinars, etc. there. But these are ones, again, that I thought were particularly interesting for folks who are familiar with BloodHound or interested in that. I mentioned ESC 14 from Jonas. He put a blog post out on it, describes all of the workings of that. It's pretty cool. It's fantastic research. Jonas he's been a machine, as you can tell. He also put out a really cool blog on basically the effects of exchange permissions model on Active Directory. It walks through kind of both the shared and the split permissions model that Exchange offers and what the differences is between them. I'll give you a hint. It's not a whole lot. So that's a pretty fascinating read, and I'm confident anybody who has used BloodHound in an environment with Exchange has seen a mess of paths associated with it. You're not crazy. They're everywhere. So definitely worth checking out. Andy did some really, really cool documentation and research into how the intra-device code flow works for authentication. So how do all those OAuth flows work together, and how can you as an analyst put that together to use it in your own tools? Very kind of technically in-depth and has a lot to do with OAuth and authentication, but really interesting and really helpful to have that information documented to understand how to collect data, how to parse things, etc. We also did some research. That's generous. Andy did some research into what was released by Microsoft about their recent breach. He did a very fantastic technical deep dive. He basically took the press release that Microsoft released after that breach and said, "Hey, Microsoft, you said this, this, and this. Based on what you said, that tells me X, Y, and Z." I highly, highly, highly recommend reading that if you have not. It is fantastic. It's fascinating. And it, to me, really demonstrates the depth of knowledge that Andy has in this space, because it is a very complex set of things that he dives through to understand. And in typical Andy fashion, does an incredible job of making that digestible to understand why the conclusion he came to made sense. As a follow-on to that, I put out a blog that basically said, "Hey, Andy, found all this really cool stuff. How do you do that? Like, so what, right? If you're an admin, if you're using BloodHound, how do you actually see what was involved in that attack in BloodHound?" And so, in that blog, we'll walk through a bunch of queries about how to see the things that we identified as a result of that research, to be able to see what's there, and understand if you have similar risks within your own environment. So highly recommend that. All of that content works for BloodHound CE as well as enterprise. So even if you're not an enterprise customer, you can make use of that. So definitely recommend checking it out if you are a user of Azure. The last thing that I wanted to plug from SpecterOps, if again, BloodHound associated, we do have a new Azure Security Fundamentals course. We launched that last month at SoCon, our first SpecterOps in-person conference. We got fantastic feedback on it. Hope and Andy and a whole bunch of other folks did a killer job of putting together a security fundamentals course. So what do I mean by that? This is not a super duper in-depth, how do I exploit Azure and do all those things, right? There are fantastic courses out there that do this. I'll just plug Durkian and Outsider Security for that specifically. This is a different level. This is, what do I need to know about security in Azure, right? What are the things that make up security? How do they interrelate to each other? It is a fundamentals course. These are the things that you really need to know to understand security in Azure. So highly recommended if you're somebody who spends a lot of time with Azure. Similarly, we have the AD Security Fundamentals course that's been out for a year and a half or so now. Same concept, right? This is not a super duper in-depth like our Red Team Operators course, which is fantastic, but again, very in-depth, very technical. This is, what do I need to understand in AD to understand what security looks like in the platform? So fundamentals are the basis of knowledge and learning. We believe that very strongly, and so that's why we've got these courses out. So if this sounds like you, it sounds interesting, the links will be there. They're on our SpecterOps webpage to explain them. Highly recommend checking those out, as they are fantastic courses, and will really help you up level your knowledge on those areas. All right. With that, thank you very much. I'm going to go and check out what questions we have now, and I'm going to take another drink because I've been talking a lot. While I'm going through these, at least for the moment, I'm going to leave this slide up. For folks who have not tried out BloodHound CE, it's free. Check it out. It's on GitHub. That link right there, if you run that one-liner in your environment, if you've got Docker Compose just installed, that will run you a BloodHound CE environment in one line. It's great. If you're going to run it long term, I would recommend grabbing the Docker Compose, pulling it down locally, making sure that you're continuing to use it and update it and all that kind of stuff. But if you just want to get going and you want to test it out, you have that opportunity. And then if you're interested in BloodHound Enterprise, I showed you some things between the two of them. There's differences listed on there. We can hook you up with a demo. Our team is fantastic. We had a webinar, time is meaningless now, last week, 2 weeks ago, that Jacob did a full demo of BloodHound Enterprise. It was fantastic. So if you want to check that out, I think that might be on our YouTube page already. If not, it's in our webinar history as well. Man, I said I was going to take a drink and then I didn't. Looks like so far the two questions we've had have been answered. The recording, again, will be available at the same link that you all signed up and joined on. We'll send out follow-up emails as well. So if you don't want to have to go back to that, you'll get it in your inbox later today, tomorrow, probably. Similarly, the slides will be sent out in that follow-up email. We'll include it in the description of the webinar, and we'll put it in our SpecterOps GitHub repo with all of our slide content as well. Awesome. Ashley put the BloodHound Gang Slack link into chat as well, so I would check that out. I will throw that into a slide as before we send it out too, just to make sure that it is as convenient as possible. All right, what permissions are required for a user account to collect data with Azure Hound on Entra ID? Asking for BloodHound CE. All right, cool thing. Collection permissions are the same across both products. Azure Hound and SharkOn use the same base code. The permissions requirements, let's see here, I can pull this up. So we have a support page for folks who are not familiar with it. So this is our BloodHound support page. It applies to both BloodHound Enterprise as well as Community Edition. We have here in our Azure Hound deployment system requirements, we've got information around what all you need, and that includes your permissions. So to collect all of the data in an Azure environment, you will need reader on your subscriptions. So that's going to be for the Azure RM side of things. So Azure RM being the IaaS or AWS competitor. For Entra ID, previously Azure AD, you will need both directory reader role on the Azure AD tenant and the directory.read.all permission in Microsoft Graph. So for those unfamiliar with Azure, we actually cover 3 different permission models within the overall system. We cover Entra ID, formerly known as Azure AD, right? The hosted Active Directory environment in there in Azure. We cover Azure RM, which is the IaaS provider similar to AWS, and then we cover Microsoft Graph. So Microsoft Graph was developed effectively as an API overlay layer. It does have its own permissions model. They used to be very closely tied together. They're now more separate. They do provide different things. What's a common question we get, which is, do I really need both directory reader and directory.read.all in order to collect all the data? The answer is yes, they are bespokely different. You can see that note that we put in there because, again, it was a very common question that we got. Any other questions? Feel free to pop them in that Q&A. If there are no other questions, then we will call it for today. I really appreciate everybody joining. It was lovely to be able to share some of the stuff we've been working on. We're excited about what we've got coming. Again, thank you to everybody who has participated in the BloodHound Gang Slack. Thank you for the folks who've contributed code or open PRs or given us feature requests or identified issues and worked with us to get those resolved. We love being able to do this. It's a lot of fun. It's really exciting to be able to help folks understand what's in their environment, the implications of the configurations they have, the paths that those create, and we're excited to be able to continue to do so. Give it just another minute, but pretty sure that seems to be it. Okay, I think we'll call it. Again, thank you everyone for joining. I hope you have a wonderful day. And if you have any other questions, please feel free to reach out to us afterwards. We're happy to help. The BloodHound Enterprise website, you can get a demo. We've got comparisons between the 2 products. We have the GitHub page for BloodHound as well, BloodHound Gang Slack. Yeah, hope to see you next time.